My wife made me wait 3 hours at an office charity ball I sponsored. When she finally showed up, she whispered, "Don't embarrass me tonight." Moments later, she announced, "He just wrote a $10,000 check to impress me." They all laughed. I smiled, clinked my glass. This morning, her best friend sent me a voicemail where she, "Don't embarrass me tonight," my wife whispered, finally arriving at the charity gala 3 hours late. "He just wrote a $10,000 check to impress me," she said loudly to a crowd of her coworkers, laughing like I was some desperate fanboy instead of her husband of 20 years. I smiled, clinked my glass. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I got a voicemail from her best friend, and that's when it all fell apart. Or, maybe, started coming together. Celeste and I have been married for 20 years. We lived, in Cincinnati, in a quiet neighborhood tucked away from the city hum. I've always liked the simplicity. I've worked in logistics my whole life. Unflashy. Steady. My hands know what to do. My mind thrives in order. Celeste is different. Always has been. She was raised in a well-off Lexington family. Thoroughbreds, champagne brunches, that sort of thing. Her idea of roughing it was a boutique hotel with no in-room espresso machine. But she was magnetic, intelligent, charming. I was drawn to her from the start, and for a long time, I think she was drawn to my stability. We met at a mutual friend's wedding. I was 35, divorced, no kids. She was 33, never married, already making waves in the nonprofit art world. I remember the first time we danced, how her hand rested lightly on my chest, how she laughed at my terrible two-step. Fast forward 20 years, and we were hardly speaking. Our daughter, Marin, left for law school last fall. That's when the silence between Celeste and me became a chasm. It had been there for a while, but now there was no buffer. No excuses. The house felt like a museum of a life we once had. Conversations turned to logistics, bills, who was picking up dry cleaning, whether we needed more coffee. Eye contact was minimal. Celeste became more involved in work events, fundraisers, board meetings, after-hour receptions, most of which I wasn't invited to, or if I was, it was in the +1 capacity, and I was expected to blend into the background. I wanted to change that. I thought maybe if I stepped into her world, made an effort, we could find each other again. That's why I wrote the check. $10,000 to sponsor her organization's annual charity ball. The Cincinnati Art Museum was the venue. It was a black tie affair, her biggest event of the year. I imagined us arriving together, hand in hand, maybe even dancing like we used to. I imagined being part of her world, not just observing it through glass. I arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. She wasn't there. Her assistant, Priya, greeted me with an overly bright smile and said Celeste was running a little late. No problem. I mingled, had a drink, took a seat near the sculpture garden, watching the way the museum lit up at night, the way guests moved like they were on rails. An hour passed, then two. At 10:12 p.m., Celeste breezed in. No apology, no warmth, just a quick glance, and then, as she passed me, a whisper, "Don't embarrass me tonight." I remember the heat in my face, the way my throat tightened, but I didn't say anything. I stood beside her as she floated from group to group like a well-dressed hummingbird. Then, during a moment of group laughter near the bar, she raised her glass and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "He just wrote a $10,000 check to impress me." They laughed. All of them. I smiled, clinked my glass against hers, took a long sip of champagne, and said nothing. That night, I barely slept. I laid awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing beside me like nothing had happened. I couldn't tell if I was angry, embarrassed, heartbroken, or all three. The next morning, around 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I wouldn't usually answer, but I was already awake, sitting in the kitchen, nursing cold coffee and an anxiety that had roots too deep to shake. It was a voicemail. "Hey, this is Madeline, Celeste's friend. We met at the gala last year. I'm not sure if you remember me. I shouldn't be doing this, but I think you need to know. She's been seeing someone. For a while. It's not just a fling. She talks about leaving you after the gala season ends. She just didn't want the drama during events. I'm sorry. I just thought you deserved to know." I played the message twice. Then a third time. My hand shook, but I wasn't surprised. Not really. It was like someone turned on a light in a room I already suspected was full of broken things. When I confronted her that evening, she didn't even pretend to be shocked. "It's not what you think," she said, brushing past me in the hallway. I just stared at her. She eventually said his name. Harper, tech investor from Louisville. Rich, younger than me, or maybe he just looked it. He had met her at a donor function months ago, and they'd apparently been close ever since. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. "I didn't want to ruin the gala," she added, as if that mattered. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. That wasn't my way. I just stood there, letting the silence fill every corner of the house. I spent the next few weeks in a fog. I couldn't eat much, couldn't focus at work. I told my boss I needed time off, and he didn't ask questions. Maybe he saw it on my face. I started walking in the mornings, Just miles around the neighborhood. No headphones, no destination. Just motion. Like maybe if I moved enough, the pain wouldn't catch up. I called a lawyer. Elena McCrae, a sharp woman in her 50s who had seen enough cases like mine to skip the sympathy and get straight to the strategy. I want it clean, I told her. Fair. No drama. She raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? I nodded. But even then, I was lying to myself. Celeste moved out a few weeks later. Packed quickly. Didn't cry. Didn't even flinch. Marin found out during one of our FaceTime calls. She was furious. Not surprised, just angry. Mom always made everything about her, she said. Even when we were kids, it was like, you were her audience, not her partner. That hit me harder than I expected. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. Just thoughts, memories, small essays I never intended to show anyone. It helped. So did joining a local men's group, where we talked about marriage, identity, rebuilding. Most of them were divorced or grieving. They didn't offer advice so much as solidarity. Madeline, the friend who left the voicemail, called again after the dust had started to settle. I just wanted to check in, she said. I feel horrible about dropping that on you like that. You did the right thing, I told her. I wish more people had the guts. We ended up talking for over an hour. Then another call. Then lunch. Nothing romantic. Just kind. Easy. For the first time in months, I felt seen. I wouldn't say I was healing, not yet. But something had shifted. The air around me felt lighter, even if my heart was still heavy. There was no going back to what Celeste and I had. I was past pretending. What surprised me the most was how quickly some of our mutual friends drifted away. People I'd known for years, people who'd eaten at our table, celebrated our milestones, suddenly stopped returning texts. I guess that's how these things go. Some people pick a side, and most of them picked hers. Maybe they didn't know what she did, or maybe they did and didn't care. Either way, it clarified things. But then there were people like Madeline, the ones who stepped forward instead of back. We started meeting up at a small cafe near Eden Park. She worked in marketing, recently divorced herself, and had known Celeste since college. She never trashed her outright, but I could sense a frustration in her that went deeper than friendship. As if she had watched Celeste walk over people her entire life and never had the opportunity or courage to call her out. One day over lunch, she said something that stuck with me. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and scans for people who can either elevate her or serve her. Everyone else becomes background. I nodded. Yeah, I know. I don't think she even knows she does it, she said. It's instinct. Marin came home for winter break that December. She hadn't seen her mother since the separation and wasn't exactly in a rush to change that. We spent long evenings cooking together, laughing like we hadn't in years. I think we were both surprised by how easy it felt, like the tension that had long clouded the house had lifted with Celeste's departure. On her last night before heading back to Chicago, Marin pulled me aside. You seem lighter, she said. I don't mean happy. Just like yourself again. I nodded, unsure how to respond. You don't have to pretend you're okay, she added. I'm not pretending, I said. I'm just learning how to be okay. We hugged for a long time before she left. After she drove off, I stood in the driveway and realized I didn't feel like going back inside. So I didn't. I went for a walk instead. By February, the divorce was nearly finalized. Celeste wanted her share of the assets, of course. Elena, my lawyer, fought hard to ensure things remained equitable but not indulgent. Celeste pushed for the house, which surprised me, given that she'd moved into Harper's place in Louisville by then. She wants the house to win, not because she wants it, Elena told me one day during a strategy call. In the end, we agreed I'd buy her out. It was more than I wanted to pay, but not worth the fight. I didn't want to live in it anymore anyway. I sold the place a month later. The funny thing is, when you strip away the things you think define your life, house, marriage, shared friends, you realize what little you actually needed. The house had become a mausoleum. Every room held a version of us that didn't exist anymore. I used part of the sale to buy a condo overlooking the river near Mount Adams. It was smaller, brighter, and didn't echo with history. The first night I slept there, I ordered Chinese takeout and ate it on the floor. No furniture yet. Just me, some noodles, and a folding chair I borrowed from my neighbor. It felt like peace. Around that time, Madeline and I saw more of each other. Slowly, carefully. She was never pushy, never overly sympathetic. We talked about everything: grief, expectations, what we wish we'd done differently. One Sunday morning, we walked around the lake at Mirror Lake in Eden Park, and she turned to me mid-conversation. You're not mad enough, she said. Mad enough? Yeah. She made a fool of you. Treated you like wallpaper in your own life. And you just keep carrying yourself like it didn't happen. I stopped walking. What good would it do? I asked. I don't know. Maybe it would let you stop carrying it around. I thought about that for a long time after. The truth is, I had been angry. Still was. But I'd buried it under layers of logic and resignation. I was used to swallowing emotion, filing it away under what can't be changed. I'd grown up in a house where men didn't yell or cry. We worked. We fixed things. We moved on. But there's no moving on if you don't first stop and sit with what happened. That night, I wrote for hours. Pages and pages. Not for anyone else, just me. I wrote about the night of the gala. About the voicemail. About the way Celeste never once looked back as she walked away from the marriage. I cried for the first time since she left. And somehow, I slept through the night. A few weeks later, I got an email from Celeste. The subject line was, "For closure." She wrote a few lines about how she never meant to hurt me, how she'd been unhappy for years and didn't know how to say it. She hoped we could one day be friends and thanked me for being good to her. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I clicked archive. There was nothing in it I didn't already know, and nothing in it I needed to hear. By the time spring rolled around, the divorce was finalized. It wasn't the dramatic courtroom showdown you see in movies. Just a series of notarized documents, quiet signatures, and a final meeting with Elena where she slid the last envelope across the table and said, "It's done." I walked out of her office into a warm March afternoon and stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, not sure what I was supposed to feel. There was no music swelling, no symbolic release of a wedding ring into the Ohio River. Just traffic, birds, and the quiet hum of a new life beginning in real time. I didn't tell Celeste it was finalized. I figured the lawyers would inform her. We hadn't spoken since the email. Later that day, I bought myself a new set of dishes. My old one still felt like hers, too delicate, too polished. These were simple, sturdy, the kind you could microwave without worrying about the trim melting. I spent the rest of the day reorganizing my small kitchen. It was nothing fancy, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine. That night, I made spaghetti and poured myself a glass of wine. I ate on the balcony, watching the city stretch out beneath a purple sky, and thought about how much space a person can reclaim when they finally stop trying to be someone else's version of enough. Madeline called around 9 o'clock. I answered with sauce on my shirt and a smile I didn't even try to hide. "Want to come with me to the opening at the Taft Museum next weekend?" she asked. "They're featuring local artists, and I think you'd actually enjoy it." "Sure," I said without hesitation. There was a pause. "You know, you sound different." Yeah, yeah, like someone who actually gets to decide where they want to be." I didn't say anything, but I think she could hear me smiling. The following weekend at the Taft, I caught myself watching people more than the art. Not in a judgmental way, just curious. You can tell a lot about people by the way they look at paintings. Some stand too close, trying to absorb every brushstroke. Others keep their distance, scanning for the story without getting lost in the detail. I used to be the latter. Now I stood close. Madeline noticed. "You see something?" I nodded, studying a canvas of a storm breaking over farmland. I used to live like I was trying not to disturb the painting, like it wasn't mine to touch. And now, I'm thinking maybe I was meant to leave a mark on it. She smiled. "That's poetic. Don't tell anyone." We laughed, quiet and easy, as if we'd always been there. The gala kept coming back to me, though, like a thorn under the skin. Not just what Celeste said, but how easily she had turned me into a punchline. How little she seemed to care about the wound she left behind. Sometimes at night, I'd remember how the laughter sounded. It wasn't malicious exactly. It was worse. It was dismissive. Like I was harmless. Not a husband. Not a man. Just a backdrop for her spotlight. And maybe that was the real betrayal. Not the affair. Not the secrecy. But the way she erased me while I was standing right beside her. I wrote about it. Poured the memory into a few essays I never shared. One of them started with, "There's a certain kind of grief that doesn't look like crying. It looks like sitting at a gala alone for 3 hours in a suit that doesn't fit right, waiting for a woman who's already left you, even if she hasn't walked out the door yet." I reread that line often. Not because it made me sad, but because it reminded me of what I survived. Marin came to visit again in early May. We sat at a small pub near downtown, sharing a plate of pretzel bites and catching up on school and work. She told me she had a summer internship lined up with a civil rights firm and had recently broken up with her boyfriend, who didn't like the idea of a woman making more money than him. "Good riddance," I said, raising my glass. She laughed. "I get that from you, you know. The low tolerance for bulls asterisk asterisk asterisk." "I'm proud of that," I said. She leaned in a bit. "You know, I think what Mom did as kid. Like, on every level. But I also think you needed something to force you to let go." That caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came out right away. "I mean it," she continued. "You gave her every chance to meet you halfway. She didn't. So now you don't have to wait anymore. You're free." I think I'd heard that word, free, from a few people. Lawyers. Friends. Even Madeline once. But hearing it from my daughter, with no judgment, no pity, just truth, it felt different. It felt like a benediction. One day in mid-May, I was walking through the Crone Conservatory, one of my favorite quiet spots in the city, when I saw someone who looked like Harper. Tall, blazer over a t-shirt, sunglasses inside. He was alone, flipping through a brochure by the orchid display. I felt my chest tighten, not in fear, but in recognition. That strange sense of déjà vu when life brings your ghosts out into the daylight. He didn't notice me, and I didn't approach. What would I say? Thanks for the wake-up call. You're welcome to her. No. Instead, I took a deep breath, turned away, and walked out toward the Palm House, where the air smelled like green and newness. Outside, I sat on a bench and watched the sunlight pour through the trees. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything to anyone. Summer settled into Cincinnati with its usual heavy humidity and long amber evenings, the kind that stretch on forever and make time feel suspended. I found myself embracing routines I never had time for before. Early mornings at Alms Park, reading in bed until midnight. Sometimes, I'd sit by the fountain in Washington Park and just watch people, families, couples, street musicians, moving through their own little stories. One afternoon, I bumped into Priya, Celeste's old assistant, at Finley Market. She looked surprised to see me, but not uncomfortable. We exchanged pleasantries. How are you? How's work? How's life? And then she hesitated. You know, she said, almost reluctantly. I always felt really awkward about what happened that night. I nodded, knowing exactly which night she meant. I didn't know she was going to say that, she added, eyes dropping to the sidewalk. The check thing. That was, I don't know. Cool. I gave her a tight smile. You were doing your job. She looked back up. You didn't deserve that, Mr. Hart. Just call me Will. She smiled. Okay, Will. Then she said goodbye and walked off with a tote bag full of produce, her head a little higher. It struck me how much guilt others had carried for Celeste's actions, like her wake had pulled people under without them realizing it. It wasn't just me she'd humiliated. It was the dignity of anyone who stood too close. I ran into Celeste once that summer, too. It was a fluke. I was walking out of a bookstore on Vine Street, and she was walking in. We both stopped. She looked good, polished, composed, the same way she always presented herself. But there was something off behind her eyes. A tension she couldn't quite hide. Will, she said. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just neutral. Celeste. She looked down at the book in my hand. You reading fiction now? Trying. She gave a tight smile, like she didn't know what to say next. I didn't offer anything. Finally, she said, I heard Marin's doing well. She is. Silence stretched between us. Just traffic, wind, and the faint sound of music from a nearby cafe. Then she said something unexpected. I don't regret everything, you know. I raised an eyebrow. But you regret something? I regret not saying goodbye the right way. I nodded. Well, this is close enough. She didn't argue, just nodded back and stepped aside, letting me pass. I didn't turn around to watch her go. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of bourbon and watched the city flicker to life below. I thought about all the goodbyes I never got. My father, who died without warning. Friends who moved away and never looked back. And Celeste, who had been leaving long before she actually packed a bag. Sometimes, we wait for closure like it's a gift someone else has to hand us. But it's not. Closure is a decision. A line you draw quietly, internally, when you finally realize that waiting for someone to make it easier is just another form of denial. I had crossed that line. Not in anger, just in truth. In early July, Madeline invited me to a small get-together at her place. A backyard evening with wine, some grilled food, a few friends from her neighborhood. I almost didn't go. The idea of making small talk with strangers still made me feel like an outsider in my own life. But something told me to say yes. It was low-key. Easy laughter, kids running around with sparklers, a couple with guitars playing soft covers of old Springsteen songs. I stuck near the grill for a while, sipping a beer and watching the fireflies blink across the lawn. Madeline joined me. You're doing better, she said. I shrugged. I have more good days than bad now. That's a start. There was a long pause. Not uncomfortable. Then she asked, do you think you'll ever be ready for something more? I looked over at her. The question wasn't loaded. Just open. Honest. I don't know, I said. But I like the quiet with you. I don't feel like I have to perform. She smiled. That's all I'm offering anyway. We clinked our drinks and didn't say anything else for a while. Marin visited again in August. She brought me a book, a new record player, and stories about her internship that lit up her eyes. We sat in the living room listening to a crackling jazz album she insisted I would love. She was right. At one point, she got quiet. You're happier, she said. Trying. No, I mean it. It's like, you're not waiting anymore. You're here. I looked at her, this brilliant young woman I helped raise, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pride. Not just in her, but in myself. September brought with it a sense of finality. The air sharpened. The light turned golden. I found myself waking early without needing an alarm, going for long walks, and spending quiet evenings on my balcony, a good book in one hand and a warm drink in the other. And then, out of nowhere, came the email. Subject line, coffee. It was from Celeste. I stared at it for a long time before clicking it open. Her message was brief. I'm coming to town for a board meeting next week. Would like to catch up if you're open to it. Just coffee. No agenda. I didn't reply right away. I thought about it. Really thought about it. The temptation was to ignore her completely. But something in me wanted to see her again, not for closure, but for contrast. To see, face to face, just how far I had come. So I said yes. We met at a small coffee shop near Eden Park, one she used to love. She was already seated when I arrived, dressed impeccably, sipping a cappuccino and scrolling on her phone. She looked up and smiled in that rehearsed way I used to mistake for warmth. "Will," she said, standing. "Celeste." We sat. She complimented my haircut, said I looked trim. I nodded, said thanks. For a few minutes, we talked about neutral things. Marin, the weather, her upcoming gallery event in Nashville. Then, a pause. "I've been thinking a lot about things," she said, voice soft, practiced. "About how it all ended." I sipped my coffee. I didn't handle it well. I was selfish. And cruel. I nodded slowly. "Yes, you were." She looked a bit taken aback by how easily I agreed. But she recovered. She always did. "I think, part of me thought you'd always be there. That no matter how far I drifted, you'd stay. I'm sorry I took you for granted." "I'm not," I said quietly. She blinked. "You're not sorry?" "No. I'm not sorry you took me for granted. Because it forced me to stop waiting. And once I stopped waiting for you to come back, I started finding parts of myself I'd buried for years." She looked at me for a long time, then down at her coffee. I could feel the control slipping from her hands, and she didn't know what to do with it. "I heard you've been spending time with Madeline," she said carefully. I gave a small smile. "She's been a good friend. I always thought she had a crush on you." "That's funny," I said. "She always thought you didn't appreciate me." Celeste gave a tight laugh. "Touché." There was a long pause. Then, she leaned forward slightly. "I don't suppose there's a world where we try again someday. I've changed." I held her gaze, steady and calm. "I'm not interested in rebuilding what was never meant to last," I said. "What you did, at the gala, after, during, it didn't just end the marriage. It changed how I see myself. I will never be someone's prop again." She sat back, clearly not expecting the firm finality in my voice. "I see." We sat in silence for a while. Then I stood. "Thank you for the coffee," I said. I walked out without looking back. Later that week, I got a call from the board of her former arts foundation. One of their members was stepping down, and my name had come up as a potential new sponsor and advisor. "Celeste actually mentioned you," the woman on the call said. "Said you were generous, insightful, and had a deep understanding of logistics and donor relations." Quite the endorsement. I didn't laugh out loud, but I smiled. "Sure," I said. "I'd be happy to help." A few months later, I was attending my first meeting as a board member on the same foundation Celeste once ran. She was now a visiting consultant, no longer in charge. Our paths didn't cross often, but when they did, I could feel the tension. I wasn't unkind. I didn't need to be. That's the thing about revenge. You don't have to destroy someone to win. You just have to build something better for yourself. And I had a new home, a renewed relationship with my daughter, a slowly blooming connection with someone who saw me, not as a donor or a background fixture, but as a whole person. I even started publishing some of those essays online, anonymously at first. Then, eventually, under my own name. They were about grief, growth, reinvention. A few of them went modestly viral. I got messages from people, men, mostly, who told me they saw themselves in my words. That they felt less alone because someone had the courage to write it down. And that, more than anything, felt like justice. Celeste once joked in a room full of people that I wrote a check to impress her. Well, that check funded the beginning of her downfall and the rebirth of my entire life. She gave me humiliation, and I turned it into freedom. Now, I don't live in reaction to her. I live in response to myself. And that, my friends, is how you win.